Welcome to the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com. My name is Todd DeWalt, and our mission here at Construction Leading Edge is to help you systematize your construction business so it becomes a source of freedom, impact, and wealth. And here's what we're going to be talking about today. Here are some questions that a lot of people have right now. A lot of construction business owners, a lot of home builders, remodelers, general contractors, trade contractors are asking questions like, should I hire people to keep up with demand, or am I going to have to lay people off soon? What should I be laser focused on for the next few months? How do I make sure I don't run out of money, run out of work, run out of people, or run out of time? Can I capitalize on this economic situation, this economic downturn? If so, how? How do I lead my team well if there is an economic downturn? And then, am I going to disappoint my customers? Am I going to disappoint my employees, or both? So in this episode, we're going to be talking about 10 ways that you can recession-proof your business, 10 ways you can make your business more resilient, more recession-proof. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And when we talk about a recession, there are a couple of different definitions. We're not just talking about a broad economic downturn. We're not talking about a great financial crisis. We're not talking about another 2008. We're not just talking about two successive quarters of GDP decline, or whatever the true economic definition of a recession is. We're talking about any big shock to your company's system. There's a great book out there called Rock the Recession. I interviewed Jonathan Slane, one of the co-authors, twice on this podcast. It's probably a good time to check that out. But he talks about how you could have a recession at any time, even though there are plenty of companies who have dealt with a recession of their own over the past few years, even during these, quote, good times. So what could a recession be? What could your recession be? It could be, again, any sort of big shock to a company's system. It could be when a key employee quits to go to work for a competitor, then you are in a recession. When a big project cancels and you don't have anything to backfill it, and you have a sudden bubble in your schedule, then you are in a recession. If something happens to you and you are the business owner and the business can't run without you, then your company, your business, and your family is in a recession. All of which is to say this: if you're in business, at some point you are going to experience a recession. You're going to experience a big shock to your business. It's guaranteed. That's why it's important to take some time and think about, how can I recession-proof my business? So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to run through these very quickly, and then I'll share with you how to do a deeper dive with a webinar that I did recently on how to recession-proof your business. So number one of the 10 tips. Number one is to drive your cash flow. Rule number one during a recession is don't crash the company. And the best way to crash your company is to run out of cash. Doesn't matter how profitable your work is. It doesn't matter how much work you have in backlog, how many contracts you've signed, how much profit you have on the books. If you run out of cash, none of that matters. So here's the deal. Recessions can often lead to slimmer profit margins, which can make maintaining a healthy cash flow tricky, to say the least. So let's get uncomfortably real for a minute. If the cash flow dries up, that's likely the end of your business. That's it. Period. If the cash flow dries up, that's going to be the end of your business. So to survive a recession, it's essential to plan ahead for ways to cushion your cash flow. So I'm not a big fan of being reactive and monitoring cash flow. I'm a big fan of driving your cash flow. That's what we teach our clients with the Revenue Maximizer tool that we've created. So you need to drive your cash flow. That means getting in the driver's seat of your cash flow and forecasting what your cash flow needs are, setting cash flow revenue targets for the future, months out in advance, and then creating execution plans to create the revenue you need, bill for the amount of work that you need to bill for on each project each month. I call it scheduling for revenue. The reality is you need to generate enough revenue to cover your cost of goods, cover your overhead, and then ideally put some net profit away. So you need to drive your cash flow. That's number one. Nothing else matters if you run out of cash. So remember rule number one, don't crash the company, which means don't run out of cash. Number two is when things get tight, when there's a downturn, you need to focus on the bottom line. You may be wondering, should I sell more? Should I focus on top line revenue? What should I focus on? And in this situation, during a recession, you need to focus on the bottom line. Focus on maximizing your bottom line profit, right? So I like to imagine a project at the beginning. You sign the contract. Before you start the work, there's this balloon, and it's full of profit. And then over the course of the project, there are these little pinpricks that I call profit bleeds. We'll talk about those in a minute. And there's a little pinprick here, and the profit bleeds out. Sometimes there's a little cut, and a lot of the profit bleeds out. Sometimes there is like an RPG round that hits the balloon and just destroys it. And then you end up writing a check to somebody at the end of the project. You become an unintentional philanthropist because you are donating your time and money to finish out a project. And these profit bleeds are some of the most egregious and common profit bleeds include rework, doing work twice because it was damaged, wrong materials, wrong location, something making extra trips out to projects. That's rework is a big one. Unsolicited charity or giveaways is a big profit bleed where you are doing work that you should get paid for and you don't get paid for it for a variety of reasons. Maybe because you just lost it. It got lost in the switches somewhere. You incurred the additional cost. The customer would be glad to pay you, but you just don't send them a change order. Or you get hit with a cost from a trade partner, but you don't pass that along. Or what happens a lot of times is there's an allowance bust or there's a budget bust. And then by the time you find out about this budget bust, it's too late to bring it up because it's just too late. So you end up just eating the cost. And sometimes at the end of a project, you end up throwing things in, eating some cost just to make a customer happy. Or in some cases, I've had customers say to me, I'm just not going to pay. I didn't like the way things went, so I'm not going to pay you 10 grand or 20 grand. That's really bad. And you end up writing a check for their project. So focus on the bottom line. Find the profit bleeds. Ask yourself, how much are we spending on rework? How much did we spend on unsolicited charity? How much did we give away in the past 6 months? Estimating misses. How much are we missing during the estimating phase of the sales process? Some big schedule delays or some big profit bleeds are schedule delays. This one's a little bit not so easy to see, but when a project gets delayed on the front end, it's a big profit bleed. And then a schedule overrun when projects run long on the back end and you overspend your general conditions budget because you have supervision on the project for weeks or months afterward, then that's a huge profit bleed as well. And then the biggest profit bleed that I talk to people about is often opportunity cost. This is the profit you could be generating with your resources if you could get on to other projects, but you can't because of schedule delays, schedule overruns. You get handcuffed to these projects. That's a big one. So some of you may be thinking, but we only do cost plus contracts, Todd. There's no way we can lose money. We're protected because we do cost plus contracts. We only work on a T&M basis. Well, I'm here to tell you, you can still lose money on a cost plus contract. As a company, you can still lose money. As a business, your business can lose money on a cost plus contract. I don't have time to get into that, but think about it. If you think you can't lose money because you're doing cost plus work, yeah, your project job P&L reports may show profit, but I guarantee you can lose money on as a business even if you're doing cost plus work. And then one last thing, I can't talk about profit bleeds without bringing up free estimates. I still talk to people on a regular basis, home builders, general contractors, remodelers who are doing free estimates. And it is the root cause of so many profit bleeds, so many uncomfortable conversations, so many problems, so many schedule delays. You can go back and listen. I've talked about this a lot. But if you're doing free estimates, that's a great place to start if you want to eliminate profit bleeds. All right, number 3 is to make your business more resilient, more recession-proof, then focus on making your team more agile and efficient, or make your team more resilient. But focus on making your current team more agile and efficient. If you're thinking, should I hire people? Should I lay people off? What should I do? Focus on making your team more agile and efficient. There were some really smart people from Harvard Business School, Stanford, and MIT who did a study back in 2017. And they studied businesses that went through the 2007-2008 recession. And they studied the company's performance. And here's what they found out is a company's performance during and after a recession. This is important. They tracked the performance after the recession as well. They found that the company's performance during and after a recession depends not just on the decisions it makes, but also on who makes them. In this study, this group of folks from Stanford and Harvard Business School and MIT examined how organizational structure affects a company's ability to navigate downturns. And here's one quote from that study. Quote, "One piece of advice would be to really think carefully about your organizational structure because that's one way you cope with uncertainty." Let me say that again. One piece of advice would be to really think carefully about your organizational structure because that's one way you cope with uncertainty. So your organizational structure is a way to cope with uncertainty. That means having clearly defined organizational structure, a documented structure, clearly defined roles and responsibilities, clearly defined lanes, clearly defined results that people are accountable for. And you need the ability as the leader to delegate results. You can't do that. You can't delegate decision-making. You can't delegate results well without having a good organizational structure. So you need to be able to, and I would say there's an opportunity for you to do more with less. I would say, not all, but I would say 95% of the businesses that I've talked to have some inefficiency in their operation. And they have some starving horse syndrome. They have toes that are getting stepped on. There are things falling into gaps, which means there's an opportunity to do more with less. Sometimes they could do more work with the same team, or maybe do the same amount of work with fewer people. So let's talk about some of these things. Starving horse syndrome goes back to an old saying you've probably heard me share before, which is the best way to starve a horse is to have 2 people feed it. So when 2 people are accountable for something, then that means no one is accountable for it. Starving horse syndrome. The other one is people getting their toes stepped on. Prime example, I was in a 2-day deep dive session with a client, and we came back from lunch, and there were, I think, 5 or 6 people around the table, and they started talking. They said, the landscaper called. One of them said, hey, did Steve, the landscaper, call you? And one person said, well, yeah, he called me a little while ago. And then somebody else said, yeah, I just talked to him today too. And then somebody else jumped in. Yeah, I talked to Steve and I told him to do this. So it turns out that out of the 6 people in the room, Steve, the landscaper, had called 5 of them. And the only person he didn't talk to was the superintendent on the project. So all of these people were spending time talking to Steve and giving Steve information, probably different information, different instructions. So it just creates all sorts of confusion, all sorts of turbulence organizational turbulence and inefficiency. So eliminating that inefficiency allows you to get more work done with less people. The other key to making your organization, making your team more agile and more resilient and more recession-proof is to delegate and decentralize. Delegate and decentralize. This study found that a lot of companies that didn't fare so well after the recession fell into the trap of hoarding decisions. There's a tendency for leaders and business owners to hoard decisions when things get a little tight. And that it's a little counterintuitive, but the key is to decentralize and delegate. Push decision-making, push authority out to your people. Now that sounds a little scary, but the study has found that hoarding decisions is a trap. And I'll tell you this, if you want your people to find another gear and be more motivated, more agile, more productive, then trust them, delegate to them, give them autonomy, tell them what you want them to accomplish, and then get out of their way. Okay, tip number four to make your business more resilient-proof, more recession-proof, and more resilient is to monitor your trade partners and your supply chain. Sometimes we get so focused looking at our own team, we just assume that, hey, my subcontractors, my suppliers, they're all going to be fine. They're just always going to be there. Well, it's not the case. So keep in mind, you are only as good as your supply chain. That's one thing I think we figured out over the past few years, thanks to COVID. If you're a typical general contractor, that means you are subcontracting 80 to 97%, maybe 100% of your work. It means you're very dependent on your trade partners and your supply chain. You may be thinking, we self-perform everything. We don't subcontract anything. Well, you're still depending on your supply chain for your materials and for deliveries. You still need somebody to supply the materials, unless you are running an Amish operation and you have sawmills, and chances are if you're Amish, you're probably not listening to this podcast. No offense to Amish folks. I'm not really sure where podcasting falls there, but I digress. So unless you're felling your own trees, running a sawmill, making your own wire, however that works out, chances are you're very dependent on your supply chain. So my advice is take a look at your supply chain, take a look at your trade partners, meet with your key trade partners, identify your key trade partners, meet with them, and consider helping them look at the big picture. Most small trade partners, this is probably more applicable to trade partners and subcontractors. If they're smaller businesses, they're probably not super sophisticated, which means they could be at risk from a recession. So consider meeting with your key trade partners and consider helping them look at the big picture, doing a little bit of coaching, so to speak. Ask them what they're concerned about. What do they need help with? You're somewhat joined at the hip with these folks. They are trade partners. You're in it together. Think about this. Which trade partners are the biggest risk? Do a risk assessment. Some factors might be if they're really small business, maybe the owner is working out in the field, in the business, maybe the owner is approaching retirement age. There could be several factors that would indicate that one trade partner is a higher risk than the others. And then look at who are the highest risk trade partners you're working with and consider proactively growing your trade partner network. We are really at risk with our plumbing contractor. Maybe we're sending all of our plumbing work to this one guy and he's not interested in hiring people, and his lead times and have grown and his performance has gone down. Those are some indicators that you could have a risk there. So proactively grow your trade partner network. And then if you want to go deeper, you want to go to the H&L, the whole nother level with your trade partners, then consider helping your current trade partners look at the big picture. sit down with them, help them do some big picture planning, ask them to meet with you and say, let's take a look at the next 3 to 6 months. What does your workload look like? What about your staffing plan? What about your working capital, cash flow? Help them do some of these things. When you help your trade partners become more recession proof, then you become more recession proof, right? Now you might be thinking, that's crazy. That's not my job. They're just blankety blank subcontractors. Could be the case. But I can tell you, if there is a recession, if there is a downturn, then the general contractors of choice are going to get the best service. So just think about the impact that would have on a trade partner. Someone, if you sat down with them and said, hey, we're in this together, we want to help you, and you take that level of interest, then how do you think they're going to respond? Probably pretty well, like most. Okay, next, let's talk about your customers. I'll share a situation, then I'll talk about the strategy. I have a client who had a bit of a local recession, if you want to call it that, happen in 2021. He had a big project lined up. He had been working on this project for months. The project represented about 50% of their annual revenue. It's a huge project. Everything was moving along nicely, moved it through design, through pre-construction. It was a few weeks before they were going to mobilize and start the project, and it was time to sign the contract, and they backed out. And they said, you know what, we're going to wait. And it caused a ginormous bubble in their schedule and had a huge impact because they were planning on that project starting. Everything was moving forward, and they had to scramble to get something else spun up because they found out that this project that was going to occupy months of their schedule just evaporated. So the strategy is to set what I call go, no-go dates with your clients on every project. So just like when you are approaching an intersection that has a stoplight, right? There's a natural point past which when you pass that point, there's a point of no return, and you just have to go on through that intersection. There's no way you can stop in time before you would end up in the middle of the intersection. Airplanes are the same way. When they take off, they hurtle down the runway, and there's a go, no-go point where once they get to that point, it's either take off or stop. And every project has a natural go, no-go date. Every project, every one of your projects has a natural go, no-go date. And if you go past that point, if you let the project go past that point and then you get a no-go, it's going to cause problems. So here's how to determine. One question you can ask to determine what is the natural go, no-go date for a project is this question. If this project is delayed, how long will it take us to spin up another project to take its place? So the question is, if this project is delayed, how long will it take us to spin up another project to take its place? A couple of examples. If you are a handyman, for example, your go, no-go date might be 7 a.m. the day of. If you have a project scheduled, you have a stack of work orders to do, and somebody calls you at 7 a.m. the day of and says, hey, I have to cancel, no problem. That go, no-go date is before you show up. In some cases, it might be when you show up at the job. That's all you need if you're doing really small projects. If you're doing, say, a $10 million custom home or a $10 million commercial build, that go, no-go date is probably more like 3 to 4 months before you start. So establish go, no-go dates on all of your projects, because if you have a client or a prospect who's if the answer is going to be no, right? If you want the answer to be yes, we're going to go forward with the project, but if the answer is going to be no go, we want to find that out as soon as possible, because If you find that out after the go, no-go date, it's going to cause you problems. And you're going to scramble to get something else spun up. More than likely, you're going to have a big bubble in your schedule where you don't have any revenue that you were planning on, and that causes problems. So my advice is on every one of your projects, establish a go, no-go date. Inform the client, hey, we need to have contract signed, all selections made, all of these things finalized before the go, no-go date. And then if that go, no-go date arrives and you don't have what you need, then you move on to the next project and spin it up. Okay. This is going to help you avoid a local recession. Speaking of clients, tip number 6 is to upsell to current and past clients. Right now, some people are thinking, oh, we need to sell more work. How do we get more work in the door? How do we sign up more work? And some of the lowest hanging fruit on the revenue tree comes from your current clients, projects that you are currently working on, maybe even past clients. So some of the highest margin work available to you is to upsell on a project that you're already working on. And not only is it high margin work, but it's also could be high value work to your client. So there are 2 simple words to ask your client during a project at the right phase. I'm not suggesting you do this at the end, but at the right phase of the project, let's say during the design phase, you can ask these 2 words. Then during the pre-construction phase, prior to signing a contract, definitely prior to starting the project, there are 2 words you can ask that will lead to work that is both high margin for you and potentially high value for your client. And those 2 words are, what else? What else? What else can we take care of for you while we're here? What else are you thinking about doing? If you're doing a renovation project, you're going to be isolated. There's going to be a mess going on in your house. What else are you thinking about doing? What else should we have asked you about during the sales process? What else are you considering doing? And then put that into the project. So upsell to current clients and then past clients. If you need sales, your past clients are much lower on the revenue tree, much lower hanging fruit on the revenue tree than someone you don't know. All right, tip number 7 is to focus on your core competencies. Number 7, focus on your core competencies. There are times to pour efforts and money and mental energy and resources into a new path with an unknown return on investment. Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the biggest rewards, right? But during a recession is not one of those times. So if you're wondering, what should I do? What should we do? What new thing should we do to fill in the blank? How can we fill in the blank? Then if you're wondering about that, then there's a very simple strategy that's very, very, very ridiculously simple, but also very powerful. And it's to do more of what's already working. Do more of what's already working. The tendency is to try to go find something new to do, some new marketing strategy, some new product, some new service, open up a new geography, acquire a new business, do something new, and there may be times for that, but during a recession is not one of those times. During a recession, it's a good idea to follow advice from Jim Collins. He talks about the hedgehog concept. There's the hedgehog and the fox. And the fox is when a fox comes along and finds a hedgehog, the hedgehog has a very simple strategy. It just does what works. It rolls up into a ball. And the fox bounces around trying to get to the hedgehog, trying new things. And eventually the fox gives up and goes on. And the hedgehog just does what has always worked. So figure out your hedgehog concept. Do more of what's already working. If you need If you're wondering, how do we find more leads? Look at what's already been working. Do more of what's already working. How do we find good employees? How did you find the employees you have? How do we get more projects? What kind of projects should we be focused on? Do more of what's already working. Double down on what's already working. Find the profitable projects, find the profitable customers, the profitable geographies, the profitable industries that work. Do more of those. Find referral partners that are working and develop more relationships with them. You don't have to do something new. Just do more of what's already working. Number 8, lead your team well. Your team is watching the news. They're seeing interest rates rise. They're seeing talk about a recession. They're hearing these prognosticators of doom compare what's happening now to the great financial crisis and the housing bust of 2008. And frankly, a lot of them are scared. They're wondering, am I going to lose my job? Should I get out, go find something else to do before I get fired? And this is time for you to lead your team well. It's probably 15 or 17 years ago, I was working for a large company, like a Fortune 100 company. And the corporate senior executive vice president came down to our office, and there were 50 or 100 of us in this auditorium, and he laid out the vision for the company, laid out the goals for the company, got us all excited about what we were going to be doing, what the company was going to be doing. And I thought, this is amazing. So the next day I went to my boss in our office and I said, Jeff, that was great. All of those things that Charlie told us about yesterday, man, I'm in it to win it. What can I do to help? What can I do to help? Like, how does what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis connect with what he told us about? And my boss, Jeff, gave the most disappointing, discouraging answer. He said, I don't know. I don't know what you can do, Todd, to connect the dots between what you're doing and that vision. So there are a couple of things you can do to lead your team well. One is to clearly identify the company's MIT list, the most important things. What should they be focused on? What are the most important things for the company to accomplish this month, over the next 2 months? What are the most important things on each project? What are the most important things, the most important strategic initiatives that they should be focused on outside of maybe their project work? I did this several years ago, and it was amazing how the quality of the team's decisions went up when I just told them what the most important things were. Because I got frustrated prior to publishing the MIT list, thinking, why the hell would they do that? Why would you do that instead of this? Well, it's because they didn't know. They were making the best decision they could with the information they had, which was none. So if you want your people to make better decisions, publish your MIT list. Tell them what the most important things are that they need to focus on. And then answer 2 questions. If you want to lead your team well through a recession or make the company recession-proof, then answer 2 questions for your team. Number 1, what does winning look like for me? And then, am I winning? People want to know 2 questions. They want to know the answers to 2 questions. What does winning look like for me? And then, am I winning? That's what I wanted to know when I asked my boss, Jeff, how can I be part of that vision? What does winning look like for me? How does that connect to what we're doing as a group, as a company, as a team? So answer those 2 questions. If you want to make your team more resilient, more recession-proof, answer the questions, what does winning look like for me? And am I winning? That's what they want to know. Number 9, it's time for you to operate as the CEO. You need to operate as the CEO. In times of crisis, business leaders need to steer the ship. Somebody needs to be at the helm. Somebody needs to be looking ahead, steering the ship, watching out for icebergs, so to speak, not down in the engine room, fixing engines, not in the cafeteria, not hanging over the side of the boat, making repairs. The captain needs to be steering the ship. The CEO needs to be prepared to put out fires, make tough decisions, plan strategically for the future based on the changing landscape of today. And it is impossible to accomplish those necessary high-level tasks if your schedule is filled with productivity-stealing mid-level tasks. If you're preparing for a recession, or if you're in a recession now, it's time to start delegating. Assess what tasks can be handed off to other folks on your team, and determine if there are cost-effective automated solutions that can complete repetitive tasks more efficiently than you or your staff. It's time for you to prioritize delegating the tasks that take the most time and offer the least financial return. Try to clear your plate of any task that is not within your wheelhouse or that yields little financial gain. As a leader, your time is one of your business's most valuable resources. Make sure you reserve it for the tasks that will deliver the biggest positive impact on your business. We call this your CEO schedule. You, if you're the CEO, if you're in a leadership position, you need to have a CEO schedule. You need to be in control of your schedule. There are things that need to be done every day, every week, every 2 weeks, every month, every quarter in order to achieve success. And you have to be in control of your day. I speak with folks, several business owners a week, who say things like, I get 200 to 300 emails a day and I have to respond to them. We'll be on a call for 45 minutes or an hour, and people will say, I'll probably get 50 to 75 notifications during this call. Their phone rings on average every 2 minutes, and they get pulled into different directions. I hear things like, I wake up in the morning, I get up early, I get started, and then I get pulled in all these different directions. And before I know it, it's 5 o'clock and I'm exhausted and I can't get anything done. And then I think I'll get some work done when I get home, after I get home with my family, but then I don't want to do that. And they just repeat that over and over and over. And they don't have the mental energy, they don't have the time to do CEO activities. And that is a recipe for disaster. Tip number 10 is a simple one. If you're wondering, what should I do? Should I focus on this? What should I focus my energy on? Leverage the 80-20 principle. The 80-20 principle, because the vast majority of what's in front of you, the vast majority of what's on your to-do list, the vast majority of the tasks on your project schedules, the vast majority of the stuff in your email box, doesn't matter. The vast majority of it is completely irrelevant. So the 80-20 principle, or the Pareto Principle, says that roughly 80% of the profits in your company, 80% of the risk in your company, 80% of the problems in your company, 80% of the results or the outcomes come from 20% of the inputs. So if you're wondering, what should I do? The first filter to run it through is this part of the 20% that will yield 80% of the results? If the answer is no, keep looking. Don't worry about it. Not all tasks are created equal. Use the 80-20 principle. Find the 20% of activities, 20% of inputs that will lead to 80% of your results. That's a good practice for anyone who's busy, but it's essential, even more essential during a recession. So there you go. 10 tips to recession-proof your business. I'll just recap these. Number 1, drive your cash flow. Number 2, focus on the bottom line and eliminate profit bleeds. Number 3, focus on making your team more agile and efficient. Number 4, monitor your trade partners and your supply chain. Number 5, set go, no-go dates for every project. Number 6, upsell to current clients. Number 7, focus on your core competencies. Do more of what's already working. Number 8, lead your team well, which means 3 things. Establish your MIT list, answer 2 questions, answer a question, what does winning look like for me? And then answer the question, am I winning? Answer those questions for your people. Number 9, operate as the CEO. Set up your CEO schedule and stick to it. Be very disciplined. Take control of your time. And then number 10, leverage the 80-20 principle. So if you want, as I mentioned, if you want to go in deeper in this and do a deeper dive on how to recession-proof your business, there's a webinar that I put together recently and has some very practical strategies. I'll go deeper into driving your cash flow, a few other things to make your team more agile. So here's what you'll learn. If you go watch this webinar, Recession-Proof, how to survive a downturn and thrive afterward, you'll learn about hiding in a room of chainsaws. Rule number 1, during a recession, a big mistake to avoid with your team. There's a lesson from D-Day, and then there's something that your team needs from you, but they will not ask you for. Something your team needs from you, but they won't ask for. If you want to watch that free webinar, you can go and watch that replay over at constructionleadingedge.com/recession. Go watch that replay. Recession-proof, how to survive a downturn and thrive afterward at constructionleadingedge.com/recession. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time. Hey, thanks so much for listening. I have one challenge and one request for you before you go. Here's the challenge. What is your 5-minute action item from this podcast? In other words, what is one thing you want to implement in your business or on your projects that will take you 5 minutes or less? My challenge for you is to create an action item as soon as this podcast is over and do it. Send yourself a text, send yourself an email, put it in your planner, write it down in your unicorn journal, whatever it is, but take action on something from this podcast episode so you get some real value from it. Now, here's the request. If this podcast has been valuable to you, please leave a rating and a review. Here's how to leave a review on Apple Podcasts on your iOS device. Number 1, open up the Apple Podcast app. Number 2, go to the icons at the bottom of the screen and choose search. Search for this show, Construction Leading Edge. Be sure to click on the show, not the episode. Then scroll all the way down to ratings and reviews, and finally click on write a review. These instructions will also be in the show notes. If you could leave a rating and a review, that would mean a lot to me, and it also helps get the word out there to other folks. And don't forget, if you want to get out of your business and make it run without you this year, go watch my free online training workshop at constructionleadingedge.com/get out. That's constructionleadingedge.com/GETOUT. Thanks so much for listening. My name is Todd DeWalt. I'll see you next time.